A lot of times as entrepreneurs, we hire people who have had very successful jobs, but they don't want to go on a journey. And an entrepreneurial organization is journey filled with ups and downs and course corrections and pivots. And you've got to build a team that understands that, embraces that, welcomes that. Because there's enough stress around growing a company from scratch, building it out of the clay, versus we had a lot of challenge with folks that had really nice logos behind their experience, but they didn't have an entrepreneurial temperament.
Have you ever wondered what makes some companies grow while others plateau or fade away? Or what makes an inspirational leader versus someone who teams dread working for? On this podcast, the executive team at Thinc Strategy chat with business leaders who share their lessons and journeys, their strategies on growth and leadership, and how they're continuously thinking ahead. On today's episode, Cindy Anderson and Karen Albritton welcome Donald Thompson, CEO of the Diversity Movement. Through the Diversity Movement, Donald partners with organizations to build and strengthen culture by connecting real-world business outcomes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, initiatives, allowing companies to achieve better business outcomes delivered by more productive, innovative teams. Here's Thinc Strategy's CEO, Cindy Anderson.
Well, Karen, our next guest is one of my favorite people. He is, every single time I have met with Donald Thompson, I have come away feeling like I am not doing enough as an entrepreneur because he has done so much and he does it. He makes everything look so easy. He's so wonderful. And so I'm super excited for our guests to be able to share with everyone his best practices.
Absolutely.
So with
Thanks. Well, Donald, welcome. Welcome to Thinc Ahead. It's great to have you here. And I've had the privilege of working with you in a couple of different ways. And today, really just excited to talk a bit more about your journey and want to start in one place. I think we'll get into a lot of different businesses that you've been a part of, but I love what you all have been doing with the diversity movement. I know that it's been through a lot of transition over the last year or two. You've been through some exciting times. So perhaps for our guests, though, if you could just start with the founder story of the diversity movement, how it got started.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I am really excited to be here and ready to share, right? And really jump in, because one of the things that as an entrepreneur, we learn and grow from our relationships with one another. And, most successful people that I've found and met are really open to sharing what they've learned because they know it's hard to grow a business, build a business, and do all the things. With the diversity movement, I'll take it back. I was asked to speak at a marketing communication symposium at NC State. And during that period of time, we were talking about multicultural marketing in the new economy. And so I built a presentation, slide deck, all this stuff. And I talked to about 150 communicators from all across NC State. And one of the folks at the very end pulled me aside and said, this is bigger than just a talk. The way that you approach diversity, equity, inclusion, and thinking about it, how it links to business, how it creates impact, how it drives growth, you should really consider doing something more than just this moment. And I was like, oh, fantastic, great, thank you so much. I've got 4 meetings I've got to go to, right? And so I scurry on. And then I started to talk to more of our customers as I was the CEO of Walk West, a digital marketing firm at the time, and hearing about companies wanting to get into and lean into multicultural marketing, branding for different audiences. And I started to ask a very specific question. Do you want to put a digital Band-Aid on it for optics? That makes sense. Pay me money. I'll do it. Or do you want to think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and marketing from the inside out so that you're telling an authentic story of what your brand stands for? I got 100% yes, but we don't know a partner that can look at DEI through the lens of the business and link diversity, equity, inclusion with the stress, the pressure, and the opportunity for how we grow. As an entrepreneur, that was the signal of signals, because I then thought, wait a minute, right? We understand marketing. We have some background in thinking about things differently and from multiple points of view. Let's put something together and let's test this thing out. And one of my theses as an entrepreneur is talk to customers and they'll help you steer the ship versus I have a great idea that the world should see. Mine is more practical. And so what we did was we built, and that we is Kurt Merriweather, Jackie Ferguson, a couple of my co-founders, and we built Diversity Beyond the Checkbox, a 5-module course on DEI. We thought we were going to get wealthy selling digital courses only, not have to have employees and all this stuff. That was the first really iteration. But because of my technology background, having built and sold a couple of technology firms, we beta tested the course. And we had over 50 different folks participate in the beta course. They gave us great feedback, but then they said, well, is this for frontline professionals? What about the C-suite? What about folks that don't have computers in their offices? What about different languages? What do you do after the course? Because a course standalone isn't going to change behavior. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We're trying to get rich selling this course and you're asking all these questions. And then the financial piece, do you all do training? Well, kind of. What do you charge for training? And then we said, well, how much do you typically pay your trainers? They said a number I liked, and we were in the training business. And so to wind it together is through that course, we figured out a couple of things. Number one, we got about 10 customers pretty quickly. When you get 10 people that are willing to pay you for what you're developing, for how you think, for a product you're offering, you may have a business versus a hobby. You may have something you need to explore. And so what we did from that point is we then set the foundation for what kind of business did we want to build. There were plenty of DEI consultancies. We didn't want to be one of many. So we slowed down and said, we're going to use training and consulting as marketing and best practices. But we wanted to create a technology-enabled business so that we could scale. And that's why we, from the very beginning, built a product-driven DEI organization so that practitioners, leaders could learn at their own pace, but we as business people could build something that would be worth buying someday at a different multiple, a different trajectory than purely a consulting business. So anyway, I could talk on and on, but that's kind of how we thought about it, how we got started. And then obviously George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, some of the tragic events in our world occurred, and it accelerated people's openness to thinking differently. And there was a catalytic event there.
So this now creates an opportunity for me to go back in your story a little bit, because I heard some things there. You were CEO of Walk West, which is a digital marketing firm. It was the fastest growing one in the state, I think, at the time that you created the diversity movement. And that's very much a professional services, a fee for service, hour-based business. Prior to that, though, you'd been in the technology business. So it feels a little bit like you maybe melded your expertise with TDM. Did that happen?
I really appreciate that. And that's exactly what happened. One of the things, we all have opportunities to learn. I think my superpower is to take areas of input from really bright people, but also mistakes and missteps, right? And making them a strength over time. And I'll give you a very quick example. I had a branding agency when I was running a tech firm, and this was early 2000s, come into my office and talk to me about developing thought leadership. And I literally laughed them out of my office. I said, I don't need thought leadership. I need customers. I need leads. I said, I don't know a thing you're talking about, right? Because I was dial for dollars. I was golf course. I was all the things, right? And now thought leadership is one of the things that I understand as a brand marketer that builds trust, that builds client intimacy. From the technology side, when we were building tech, I understand that you don't have to build everything yourself to build a proof of concept. Merge off-the-shelf technologies with a front-end user interface, build that MVP as fast as possible so that you can actually test your thesis in the market. And then when you invest significantly in building technology, you know what to build against a pipeline, not what to build against a pipe dream. And so these things were lessons that were born out of pain, but we flipped them and figured out how to make progress from them. So Karen, very much so taking the mistakes from the past, the learnings from the past, and kind of incorporating them into TDM. And the last thing I'll say about the thought leadership piece is we were very intentional about products. We were also very intentional about selling our brand through education. And so we started 3-4 years ago with webinars that had 10, 15, 20 people on them. Our webinars now today, of which you're going to be a guest on one in a couple of weeks, and we appreciate it very much, we average 400 to 500 registers. And so now we're controlling that narrative, but we're also giving away value so that by the time people are ready to make a buying decision, we are not the only choice, but we're always in the top consideration set for the ability to compete. And that's really all you want as an entrepreneur, is the ability to compete.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I also admire about you, Donald, you've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. You've bought and sold businesses, you've grown them, you've been an operator, you've been a mentor, you've been a board member, you've been all the different positions that you can be within these various organizations. But you always do something that really is very compelling, and that's that you never try to do it alone. When you buy these businesses, you really try to work with the people that are part of that to scale it and grow it. Talk to us a little bit about that intention and where that came from.
You know, I'm the son of a football coach. I had the advantage to watch team sports at a very high level in terms of Division I sports, and played sports all my life. And I never saw championship teams without a team effort. And there may be one or two people that get more of the limelight, but to create an environment where everybody knows their role, credit is shared, where people have the opportunity to grow and expand, is something I grew up with and I really, really valued. And then the second piece that I'll tell you very candidly, in most of the businesses that I assumed levels of leadership, I was not the subject matter expert. So by default, I had to lean on skills that I had, things that I did very well. But in the technology space, I had to really be intentional about finding technologists that were teachers that could help me learn and grow. In the marketing and branding space, right? I understood some components, but then I had to find folks that were stronger than I was in corporate branding, stronger than I was in social media. I was good at integrating those pieces together, but I didn't feel like I needed to be the SME in every piece that we offered. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are held back by their own ego, right? Which then informs economic decisions in the wrong way. And I'll give a very specific example. I was talking to an extremely talented technologist today. And I mean, great idea, love what he's doing. And he was talking about building his own AI engine. And I was like, why on earth would you do that?
Right.
Literally, I was like, he's like, well, I just think there's some gaps. And I was like, hey, man, I said, hold on a minute. I said, I don't care how much money I invest. Me, you, and everyone I know don't have as much money as Microsoft. Right. I said, so what we're going to do is use what they've got, and what's missing, we're not going to sell. Right. Right. And so a lot of times when you can do something, when you're scary smart, you want to build. But at the end of the day, I asked that entrepreneur, what's our objective? And our objective is to create a valuable business that serves clients. And the longer you're building something custom, the longer you're waiting to be in market. The more that you can add something that is configurable, and this is super important when you're talking about a business. Customization is expensive. Configuration is less expensive. So you can use something that is more general and configure it for a specific use case. Now we can build an enduring business. But if you think your uniqueness is to build custom software, where are you going to find the people to do that you can afford quickly right now? You hamstring your business just with that limited thought process.
And you said it earlier, you're not listening to your clients, because when you're customizing in advance for something you don't really know for sure they want and need. And so listening to your clients and building something that can meet the need of their feedback is really compelling.
That's right.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation with a member of a leadership team of one of our clients a couple of weeks ago. And there is that tension between, if you want to create something new and you want to do something new and improve in an industry that you're in, you want to do something different. And yet you can only do what the market will buy. You know, if you're going to stay in business. And I know that you have, worked with a number of businesses and entrepreneurs, and I guess how much of what you do, or maybe even what would you tell an entrepreneur about as they're building their business, what are some key things that they should be looking for or doing to scale to something of value?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I really appreciate it. And again, through lots of learning, and I do have a perspective. So the one thing is being self-aware, and that self-awareness, I want to be really specific, right? What is your superpower? My superpower really lands in business development and strategic partnering. I do a lot of different things, but bringing together revenue producing entities and creating something valuable is what I do really well, which means one of the top hires at the diversity movement was Shelley Willingham, who could head up sales, right? Because I would naturally try to go do that because I was good at it, but somebody had to go run the entire business. So I actually hired in an area of strength so that I could work with the rest of the team in areas we need to grow, right? So number one is being self-aware with who you are, what you are good at, but also what you should be doing in the organization. So building out that initial team, that leadership team and organization is only done well with entrepreneurs when you know what brings you joy to do, what you're good at doing, and what you should be doing. The second component to that, I think that's really important as we're building teams, is you have to understand the difference between people that want to go on a journey and people that want a job. And a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we hire people who have had very successful jobs, but they don't want to go on a journey. And an entrepreneurial organization is journey filled with ups and downs and course corrections and pivots. And you've got to build a team that understands that, embraces that, welcomes that, because there's enough stress around growing a company from scratch, building it out of the clay, versus we had a lot of challenge with folks that had really nice logos behind their experience, but they didn't have an entrepreneurial temperament. And that became a mismatch. And we had some churn because of that early in our career. And the final thing that I would say for entrepreneurs is that we all think about raising money, raising capital, and different things. And that's all important depending on your strategy. But if you can't sell what you're doing to create revenue and grow customers, then what you'll do is get good at selling investors, which is a different skill set, right? Selling investors is different than client acquisition. Get good at client acquisition because investors will follow that even if you're bad at your pitch. You could have a bad pitch and not be super persuasive, but say very simply, I know how much it costs to get a customer. We got 50 of them last month. And if you help us with your money, we'll get 1,000 of them doing this thing. You can say that in broken English. You can say that using all kinds of things that aren't business cool or MBA cool. But if you know how to get and keep a customer, then the investment community will respect that, versus a lot of people get good at pitches. And so those are some of the things that I would encourage entrepreneurs to think about that we've learned over time.
And even when you're acquiring a company and you're thinking about the seller, the person who was the entrepreneur, they're now selling their business to you. And can they pivot to, maybe they're going to leave the business and that's okay, but how is the market going to react to that? How are our clients going to react to that? But if they're going to stay with the business, can they, and how do you make that transition, Donald, with them to help them get out of the doer-seller mode that most entrepreneurs get in, right? Let's go out and get work, and then I'm the best at doing it, so I'm going to do it. You said even when you have strengths in places, sometimes you still need to hire that role because you shouldn't be doing that if you want to scale.
Exactly. Now, shifting back to the diversity movement for a minute, you all have recently joined forces with Workplace Options, WPO.
Yes.
And
congrats.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Such a great partnership. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how that came to be, some of the considerations that you made as you were thinking about doing this?
Yeah, I can expand on that. So one, we weren't looking to sell the business. It's very early, right? One of the things as an entrepreneur, when you get over that $1 million threshold, then you get to $2 million and $3 million and you're growing, right? We were looking to be a little bit more patient and have our products be more mature so that our valuation could be more product centric versus consulting centric. But when you're growing, your brand is starting to get some recognition. You're recognized by EY, Entrepreneur of the Year. Forbes gave us some awards, Fast Company. people start to get you on the radar. And so we were getting a lot of interest calls, if that makes sense, but purely from financial investors. And one of the things that's really important as an entrepreneur that's looking to exit your business is you've got to know what kind of company you want to exit to. And so for us, we were looking for a strategic partner, a strategic acquirer. Because one, if we were going to get sold early, that means the environment we were becoming a part of needed to be inclusive for our continued growth. And so in the case of Workplace Options, a wellness company, a well-being company, with over 150 sales professionals across the globe, 21 countries, 1,200 employees, $100+ million organization, I was like, wait a minute, I think I need to hear this. Because one of the things that we did not have as a small but growing business was global distribution, global footprint. And with the economic uncertainty that we're in, with a crazy election that's coming, with people just kind of at each other, woke DEI versus this and all of this stuff, I wanted more weapons. And so when I thought about the considerations, right, if you're going to go through a storm, I'd rather be on a bigger ship, right? And that was one of the things that was really important. The second thing that was important is, would we be fully integrated with WPO initially, or would we be allowed to expand and continue to grow the diversity movement brand? And they were very thoughtful in seeing the momentum that we developed, right, at such a young age in our company. And so we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Workplace Options, where we get the backing, the support of a large organization, but we still get to operate, right, as the diversity movement, a separate entity, and continue to build and grow that leadership brand. And so we're pretty excited about the combination, the timing, and then also the final thing is access to clients. So if you think about a small business and the amount of time it takes you to get a large organization to pay attention, to care, and then you finally win the business, and then you got 2 months of work in legal, right? You finally win, right? All the decision makers say yes. Everybody says yes. You're our choice. You go through the dance off, and then you get this 40-page MSA, right? And you're like, yo, what is going on, right? And then you get payment terms and all this stuff. Well, we wanted to have some of our revenue mix be with existing clients of WPO, where trust was already established, a pipeline of processing relationships was already established, and now we can grow in a much more freer, in a much more aggressive way. And that's a couple of the reasons why we thought about doing it, and it was the right time. And of course, a couple of zeros were correct.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
So
fantastic.
there's that.
Donald, the other question I would have is, how is your key leadership? You have an amazing leadership team at the diversity movement. I mean, you have people who really understand organizational psychology, how teams work together, how people work together, and how to be inclusive in a way that doesn't feel like it's just like a checklist of things that you're supposed to remember. It's so different than that. Talk to me about how they're feeling today and what's their level of excitement about it.
Yeah, I will tell you, it's a mixed bag, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. If people at WPO hear this, it's no big deal. It makes sense. Moving from a small organization that moves quickly to a bigger organization with a different set of rules, requirements, budgeting, different things like that, it's different.
Yeah, it's change, and they know the game with you and diversity movement, but what's it going to be like as a wholly owned subsidiary? So that role that you play in the integration is pivotal in helping them get comfortable, but also helping the business scale, right? I think so many times buyers don't leave someone like you in there that's going to help your team make that transition.
Yeah. I would expand on that and give a couple of very specific points when you're looking at integration. And this has happened a couple times. When I'll go back to selling a company called iCubed, which was a technology firm we sold. And we sold to a company called KPIT out of Pune, India. And I was a direct report to Sachin, who was a member of their board of directors and a part of their executive council. That was a very important negotiation point because that created organizational visibility based on who I was reporting to and the statement that made with us entering the organization. And so that was really helpful and successful. And Sachin and Pawan and some of the leaders that I worked with at KPIT are still great friends to this day. but that really helped. As I fast forward to ICI Digital that we sold to Behringer, private equity, Greg Boone, who ran that business when I became the board chair, also we took that learning, and his report structure was to one of the private equity partners, one of the senior partners. And the reason I think that's critical of where you end up in an organization, no matter the size or scale, is if you don't get wired into the right internal relationships, you can get lost in the infrastructure of a larger business. But as long as you get wired in appropriately, then that senior leader can help you determine what things you're just going to have to learn and adapt to, or what things that a little chess piece can move to the left or right to make it easier and better for your folks. With Workplace Options, I report to Alan King, our CEO, and our relationship is continuing to grow and develop. But I will tell you this. I had a small little situation that required Alan's feedback. He and I meet every couple of weeks. Hopefully I'm a good lieutenant to deal with. Like, I like to handle things before I bring them to him and different things like that. But there was something that needed his attention and I needed his advice. And I talked to his assistant, Rose, and got in with him, and we worked something out in a day that was really important to a couple folks on our team. So I think it's really critical that the people and the personalities see eye to eye on how to run a business. And then the scale part you can work through together. But if you don't have good relationships and it's a pure financial transaction and you don't have those discussions up front, it's much harder from an integration standpoint. And I've seen it done a lot both ways.
I think that's such a great point. You reminded me of one of my transitions and how that whole question of who we would report into really, really mattered and had a lot to do with how successful we were or were not in integrating the business early on. I wonder if you might, have any other tips or advice that for someone who's perhaps being pursued or considering selling their business about some of the things that you look for.
Yeah, so a couple things when I'm in that mode of selling the business. Number one, I want to have a multitude of counselors. We chatted with you all at Thinc as a part of the process, and as we were thinking through things, we have a great legal team that we work with over at Michael Best and James Forrest and David Morris and team, because you're going to be emotional, right? So you have to know up front you're going to be emotional, and so you need folks that you trust around you to manage the difference between your emotion and what makes economic sense, what's good for your people, and the process that you're going through. Because due diligence and even kicking the tires at a high level, once you start in due diligence, it's really hard. It's at any level, right? It's lots of suits, it's lots of lawyers, lots of accountants. And this thing that you built with your blood, sweat, and tears and your emotion is now being wired down, right, to dollars and cents. And that doesn't feel right to an entrepreneur. And then you always have a higher sense of value personally, right, than the other side of the table. Like you
course.
You always, right?
I hope so. I hope so, right? You should.
Right, exactly. And so you've got to figure out creative ways to manage that, right? And one of the things, and without going into detail that would be confidential, but because we were a younger firm, right, we didn't want to be valued on where we were today. We wanted some future upside on what we were building, right, in order to make our investors and our team whole. And so a lot of times that's difficult if you're just looking at the math. But if you have creative financial engineers that you're working with, right, you can figure out ways to structure performance-based incentives. You can figure out ways to structure things so that everybody has as close to the right opportunity as possible. None of us ever get all that we want. But what you want to do is have a spirit of fairness in the dialogue. The other thing that I would say to entrepreneurs that are thinking about this, and this is super important, you need to know the levers to your numbers.
Yes. Before someone asks you, you need to know your own numbers. Thank you, Donald.
You've got to know your business inside out. And here's a couple reasons why. And here's the biggest reason why. If you don't know your numbers inside out, then you can't talk about the future with power. You have to know why you took a loss because you're investing in a new product, when that product's going to hit market, What is the pipeline for that new product such that it shouldn't be valued just in today's state? It should be valued against the pipeline. You have to know the numbers so you can be on offense when you're discussing the value of your business. Because what will be discounted is you as an entrepreneur talking about how great it is without the underpinning of the language that buyers hear. And that's the financial impact. And it doesn't matter what business you're in, wellness business, DEI business, is still a business. And the language of that business is growth, customers, profit, scale. And those things supersede.
Yeah.
That is such an important point, that you know your business, you know your contracts, you know what's recurring, and you know what is project based, and you know why that matters to a buyer. You know, some of that is going to be guaranteed cash flow for a while because of a contract, but other things are not going to be, but they're going to be higher margin. If you know that and you can talk about it, then you also gain so much more credibility with that buyer, because they understand that you know your business better than they do. What's really bad is when they look at it and they tell you things about your business. That's when due diligence gets really uncomfortable, right?
That's right.
Sure.
I would echo one item to just expand a little bit in knowing your business and your numbers. Why is someone acquiring your business? So one is the financials, one is the customers, but then it's also the positioning impact of your people to create a value add to the new culture.
Right. And your
And so
brand, right? Your
that's
total
exactly
brand.
right. That's exactly right. And so to the degree that you can talk about your people, the powerful performance, and then how that performance can impact the new organization, now you set a mental model to the value of your team. And that is where you start integration that then creates an environment of how your team is treated when they walk into the door. And those things are really important, even if they're a little subtle. But it's always nerve-wracking. That's not going to change. It's always sleepless nights. Should I do it or not? And different things like that. But I will say this: the exit opportunities, and when you've done it a couple of times, it's almost like a house. Some people will buy houses to flip, right? One of the great points of advice from Grant Willard, my mentor and good friend, he said, build a business that you would want to run for 10 years. And so when doing that, then when suitors come, you're not in a mode where you have to sell. You've built a business with a team that you enjoy working with, customers that you want to serve, a business that you can see yourself running for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And that ability to think about it from that perspective is your singular most impactful negotiating component, because you're willing to say no. Life is okay right now, slugging it out with the team that we've got. If you have a better option, we want to hear it. But our current option's not bad.
Absolutely.
And what we're doing is good.
So true. So true. Well, Donald,
So
this has
true.
been fantastic. And we could occupy your whole day. I'm sure we could just the three.
I would love to.
Yeah,
I
the
love
three of
tapping
us.
your brain.
Yeah, the three of us could. There'd be no shortage of conversation. But I want to, in closing, I want to ask you, because you've demonstrated the ability to do this so often. How do you think ahead?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it very simply. I have a lot of wonderful relationships with really scary, smart folks. And by continuing to cultivate that network, you hear little nuggets of things, of what's happening in different industries, business, what people are excited about, what people are concerned about. And that allows you to be future focused. Because as an entrepreneur, as a leader, right, you have to be able to think in multiple time horizons. What am I doing today that matters to the business? What do I need to get done tomorrow? And how these things impact, right, the next 2 to 3 years that I want to be in business and grow. And so the way that I think ahead is really managing intentionally the partnership and relationships with folks from very diverse backgrounds. And in this case, I'm talking about financial, legal, marketing, branding, M&A and strategy with Thinc and different things that you all are doing. And now all of a sudden I get smarter by that association, right? And that's something that helps me think forward in a major way.
Thank you so much. You are awesome. You really are.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. I've had a lot of fun, and yes, I could talk all day. So you gotta give me some time limits.
Well, you're going to be coming back, so
You'll be coming back. You'll be coming
We'll
back.
be roping you back in.
Right.
That's awesome.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Think Ahead. We hope you've gained some valuable insight and inspiration to propel your business forward. Remember, success is not a destination but a journey, and Think Strategy is here to help you every step of the way. Visit thinkstrategy.com. That's THINC strategy.com for more info. And for more of this podcast, press the follow button and share with your network. This podcast is edited and produced by Earfluence. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon on Think Ahead.